思議と俺は悲しみを感じなかった。ただ現実感がないだけだった。そしてだんだんと自分の中で何かが麻痺していくのを感じた。半年経って俺は賭けをした。もしこの時計が止まった時、まだお前が戻らなかったらこの星を出ようって。
Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is the third in a series of 4 videos based on episode 10 of Cowboy Bebop. We're just going to jump straight in.
不思議と俺は悲しみを感じなかった。ただ現実感がないだけだった。不思議と俺は悲しみを感じなかった。ただ現実感がないだけだった。
I actually have a pet hatred of the word kanjiru in Japanese. That may seem weird. You may think, oh, this seems like a pretty normal verb. What's the problem? What's the problem? Yeah, I know. It doesn't seem like it should be that much of a problem, but let me explain what I mean. The problem probably stems more from English, in fact, than Japanese. Consider the following sentences. I feel happy. I feel like it's going to rain. I feel a pain in my gum when I press it. I feel like such an idiot. Here, I'm the subject. It's all I feel, right? Funny thing about to feel in English is that inanimate objects can also be the subjects. It feels quite heavy. It feels like quite a big responsibility. It feels like velvet. And you can also use the dummy subject, it, with the verb to feel too. It feels like it's going to rain. How many of these sentences can be translated naturally into Japanese using the verb kanjiru? The answer, to be honest, is that I'm not 100% sure. I'm not saying that I don't have any idea. I'm just saying that it's not completely obvious to me what the boundaries are on correct usage of the verb kanjiru. If I were actively trying to improve my Japanese at this moment in time, which to be honest I'm not, but if I were, I would seek out a native and I would sit them down and I would get them to tell me exactly where I could and where I couldn't use the verb kanjiru. Can you see the problem here? When we use the verb to feel in English, we're using it with quite different subjects. We're using it with quite different pieces of content. You can feel an emotion, you can feel a physical object, you can feel like something's going to work or like something isn't going to work. An inanimate object can feel a certain way in the sense that it has a certain texture to it, right? There are lots and lots of different things being expressed here. So when I hear kanjiru in Japanese, I'm always reminded of the fact that I'm not 100% sure where I can use it and where I can't. And this problem grows out of the way English works to some extent. And this isn't a problem of comprehension. So when Jet says, 俺は悲しみを感じなかった, it's completely obvious what that means. Comprehension isn't the problem here. It just means something like, speaking literally, I didn't feel sadness. What's hard here is figuring out exactly where you can use it and where you can't. So the problem really is lexical more than grammatical.
そしてだんだんと自分の中で何かが麻痺していくのを感じた。そしてだんだんと自分の中で何かが麻痺していくのを感じた。
There's nothing too fascinating or dramatic in this bit, so we'll just take a look at the expression 何かが麻痺していくのを感じた. This していく form isn't as commonly used in Japanese as its counterpart してくる, but that said, it's not particularly exotic either. So it's helpful to be familiar with it. Jet here is talking about a drawn-out process whereby he could feel something or he felt something gradually freezing up or losing sensation or coming to be paralyzed inside him. So you're talking about a process that extends over a certain period of time and that has no obvious end point. It's not very easy to convey this nuance in English because we just don't really have an expression that matches this piece of Japanese very exactly. Ignoring here the difficulty of choosing the right English expression to match the Japanese mahisuru, I would probably say something like, I felt something freezing up inside me. Or maybe even I felt something shutting down inside me. But it's not obvious that there's one good translation in English that's always going to allow you to translate this piece of Japanese well.
半年経って俺は賭けをした。半年経って俺は賭けをした。
This is just a pet peeve of mine. Sometimes when people are speaking a foreign language, they use funny expressions for periods of time, expressions that sound acceptable in one language but weird in another. So when you hear the Japanese word hantoshi, that obviously means half a year, but I never say half a year in English. Once in a blue moon you'll hear someone say half a year in my experience, but we normally just say 6 months, right? How long are you going to be there for? Oh, you know, about 6 months. That's what I'd say. The flip side of that is an English speaker speaking Japanese might end up saying 6ヶ月, which is comprehensible but I think a bit strange. In Japanese, hantoshi is much more natural. Think of an English word like fortnight, not the game, the period of time, right? 2 weeks. To me, that seems to be a bit specific to English. I can't think of any other language that has any sort of expression like that means 2 weeks. My Russian students, by which I mean Russian people or Russian speakers who study English with me, they drive me up the wall by saying that Tuesday is their weekend, or Wednesday is their weekend, or Thursday is their weekend. Why do they do that? Because there's a word in Russian that means a day off from work. So normally you use that word when you want to talk about the weekend, but it actually means a day off. It doesn't mean the weekend, it doesn't mean Saturday and Sunday. So on Monday they'll say, tomorrow is the weekend for me, and it drives me up the wall, but it's difficult to get them to stop doing it because it's harder to learn the expression day off than it is to deal with the word weekend, which they probably learned back when they were at school learning English. Some of these lexical problems can be very difficult to resolve. You can spend years learning a language, trying to speak a language, speaking a language quite successfully, and still not be able to iron some of these wrinkles out of the way you speak it. If you take, for example, the Japanese word kuyashi, that's an e-adjective, just a normal e-adjective, but it took me ages to figure out exactly where to say it in Japanese. Looking it up in the dictionary doesn't help because you get stupid things like irksome or vexatious. When was the last time you used either of those words in English? Because kuyashi is quite a normal word, it's reasonably commonly used. If you hear these words in context, then one day a light will go on in your brain and you'll say to yourself, you use it there to convey that feeling, that sensation. But until that happens, these words can be very frustrating. Remember, if you don't know where and how to use a word, you don't truly understand it. You only have a partial understanding of a word until you know where to use it.
もしこの時計が止まった時、まだお前が戻らなかったら、この星を出ようって。もしこの時計が止まった時、まだお前が戻らなかったら、この星を出ようって。
Here to finish off, we're going to look at another nasty, probably irresolvable problem. The verb deru is supposed to be intransitive, right? Or a jidoshi, as it's called in Japanese. But Jet seems to use it as a transitive verb, tadoshi, right? Kono hoshi o deo. O is indeed the direct object marker, so you would expect it to be used with transitive verbs, tadoshi, but it's often described, if you look at grammar references, as having another meaning. It's often described as marking a place through which or from which an action takes place. The classic example is this one. Tori wa sora o tobu. I'm going to come right out and say it. I actually hate this analysis. I'm sure it has its merits, but to me it feels like an effort to impose order on something that is intrinsically chaotic and somewhat random. Why don't we just say that deru is mucky and awkward and can be transitive or intransitive depending on the context? In English, you can leave a planet, right? You can just leave a planet, and that's obviously a transitive verb. Well, why doesn't that work in Japanese? I don't see any problem with it. Sushi o taberu. Somebody eats sushi. Hoshi o deyo. Let's leave this planet. I don't see the problem. Verbs are often messy, I think, in probably any language. You can shoot a gun, and you can shoot a person, and you can shoot a bullet out of a gun at a person, and you can shoot a person with a gun. It's not obvious how many different sorts of direct object the verb to shoot can take in English. You shoot the gun, you shoot the bullet out of the gun, you shoot the person with the gun. It seems kind of chaotic, but we know as natives how it works, right? If you want to look this up, I believe it's called valency in linguistics. The term comes from chemistry, but it's also used in linguistics. How many different types of object can a verb take? And I'm sure the concept applies in other contexts as well. If you're interested, look it up. And anyway, that's it for today. Thanks for coming by. Hope this was useful. As always, I will see you next time. Thanks very much. Ciao, ciao. Bye bye.